What's up, guys? So today I have a question from Biggs, who said, "I'm sorry if you already have a video on this topic, but how hard was it to transfer to making legal money? I made a promise no more scams or fraud when I turned 18, and I found it really hard to transition." So first off, Biggs, dude, congratulations on that. It's a tough road. But at the end of the day, for me, really, it wasn't a difficult transition, honestly, because like for me, my real drug of choice, is the euphoria that comes with learning something new, and making money. And that's one thing I've come to learn about myself is that there are a million ways to make money. Some of them, and some of the ways that are considered by society to be easy are actually the hardest. And when we give into that misconception of like it being easy, is really when we fall into the trap and realize how hard it is. That's like, dealing with a case or like, like you go and you steal, 20 grand, do like fraud. And then, you have that in restitution, plus you have like $100,000 in lawyer fees or whatever it is. I just think it's a lot. I've never done fraud. So I really can't speak to that. But as far as like, selling drugs and switching it up, really it's all just business, bartering, selling and stuff. It's just like, so I didn't have an issue with it. I was happy to have my freedom and to be around my family again, to have real coffee, to not be around, a bunch of scumbags, which unfortunately prison's full of. There's some good guys there too, but there's a lot of douchebags. So like I was happy for that. And that for me was my motivation, just being away from my family was motivation enough to not, make those same, I don't want to call them mistakes, because like really at the end of the day, like everything I did was intentional, it was all planned. It was super premeditated. Like I cannot call it a mistake. Yeah, I mean, I miss it. Like I enjoyed doing it. I don't feel sorry for what I did. There's no victim in any, in what I did. There's no victim listed in my pre-sentencing report because there is none, and I've had people argue with me, well, you have victims, they're the drug addicts that you, I'm like, dude, like the drug addicts that smoke weed, the drug addicts that, have a bad sex life in their marriage that's been going on for 20 years. So they take X, mushrooms. No one's ever OD'd on them. So like, and the hard stuff I sold, like acid, I guess you classify that as hard. And like powder cocaine, and obviously powder cocaine, you can make it. I think the worst drug I sold, honestly, was moonshine. It's the most hardcore one, it's super addictive. You know what I'm saying? Like people have died from alcohol poisoning, but a side issue. So transitioning to legal money, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that it doesn't come as quickly on the onset, but it comes like once you've built a business, it comes much more steady and much more quickly after a certain amount of years. And at the end of the day, you're never going to pay that Fed tax where it's like, like owning a business, you have to pay legitimate taxes. But like as a drug dealer or as a drug trafficker, your taxes are a lot higher, and people are like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what the hell? Well, that's because like if you get popped as a drug dealer, darknet or not, like the feds are taking everything. They're taking everything. You got a house, you spent 5 years, say you did construction, and you worked your ass off for 5 years. You bought this house and, now you get popped and, the feds are going to try to take that from you. And like, now you have to prove that you didn't buy it with drug money. And it's just insane in this country that, you have to prove that, private property is yours and you didn't buy it with, drug money. Like, yeah, it's insane. But you don't have to worry about that with the legit money, and keep that in mind, I've met, going from like, a medium security facility all the way down to a minimum security facility. Like I met all kinds, man, from murderers to, dudes who are, millions and millions and millions of dollars, they just refuse to pay taxes and they're doing, a 7-year bid for tax evasion, or like, that guy who ripped off, tens of millions of dollars, and, got popped and they gave him a 10-year bid for it, like there's no illegal money that's worth, me catching a bid and being removed from my family. And it's just, it's just not, especially when this world is so open with possibilities on what you can do, and like by the sound of it, you said, when I turned 18, obviously, you're younger than I am. Like my hope for you is that intelligence, the promise you made, that you keep that promise, because it will be a really good decision on your part. Like it's really intelligent, especially because, I don't know, like I'm assuming you made that because it's like, oh, like once I'm 18, I can be charged as an adult, like 8 years. Absolutely true. So that's a good thing to stay away from. And like, if it's a federal case, man, like they might not care about how old you are. Like, and you being being under 20 or whatever is a bad hit, because like you being under that age, like the youngins are the ones who wile out, who are usually more violent. So right off the bat, the BOP or federal prison system will score you higher. So you have a higher chance of being in a low or a medium security facility, right off the bat, just by your age. So that's good to hear. But I really didn't have a tough transition, man, because I had a lot of time, to think. And so you have an IQ, right? But you also have an AQ, and AQ is an adversity quotient, and they actually have a way to measure it, just like the IQ test. Adversity quotient is a test, and you Google it, you'll find it. The test that I took for adversity quotient had a range of like 0 to 200. And on that range, I scored a 175. So I am super adaptable. Like, you can stick me at like a high society fundraiser function, and I'll be great in a suit or a tuxedo. You can stick me in a prison cell block in a federal facility, and I'll be the same, hanging around with dudes with 8 life sentences. I'll be good. There's not a place, I like to think, that you can put me that I won't survive. And that's, adaptability. And that really, at the end of the day, is the key to survival. And not only just surviving, because surviving's good, but getting past surviving to that point of thriving. And that's what my goal is to do that. And like, so for me, like my book was a big, middle finger to the BOP and the federal prison system. It's called Compassionate Release on Amazon. It's not formatted very well, because though the ebook isn't formatted very well, the print book is formatted great. Except the margins are a little too big, but there's nothing I can do about that. It was my first book. I did everything by myself. So like, it is what it is. But it was just mainly intended as a way to help guys who are incarcerated get out, on compassionate release. And that said, like, all my next works, my next books, my documentary, that I'm working on, my course that I'm working on, like all that stuff, is intended to, one, generate revenue, obviously, but also educate people about things, and to be able to keep them safe. And, as a reliable guide on how to do all that. But aside from that, like I closed on my first house recently, which is a massive, massive thing, obviously. And, my intention is to wait a couple months, save up some more and buy another one. And, just like when I build up equity in one house, drain it out and use it as a down payment for another house. And just make sure I always have that positive income, flow where I'm bringing in, I don't care how much debt I take on, as long as I'm making more money, like if I have $10 million in debt, but I'm making 10 grand a month, I don't care, and I'll keep pulling that equity out of those homes. And, I'll end up just bleeding them, for it's 27 years of depreciation that you have, with a house. So, massive write-offs. So you're not actually, you don't have to pay money on a lot of this shit. And that's my goal. Real estate is how I plan on achieving, financial freedom. So, that said, like, you find your own goal and how you achieve it. I find, like, real estate is probably the best money. Like, my thing is like buying a multifamily, splitting it up and renting it out as apartments. And that's pretty much the safest way I've seen personally to deal in real estate, because you don't have to worry about trying to sell it or fix it up in time. And like, you can rent it out almost instantly. And it doesn't matter in that case what the housing market looks like, because you're in the renting market, and that almost always goes up. So I plan on doing that. I want to make, I want to get to a point where I make 10 grand a month, passively. And then I just hire a property management company to make sure that tenants always stay in there and the maintenance stays done. And just like, I want to hear anything about it. Just send me a check, every month I get my check for 10 grand and, do whatever I want. And that'll probably be do things like this, make more content, make more videos, investigate things, teach things. Like, that's what I want to do. And then, generate revenue from those things, and make it so that my kids have that financial freedom, but they have it sooner in life than, right now I'm 38, make sure they have it sooner in life than at this point. That's my goal. And to educate the world and how, and to spread that knowledge. Anyways, those kind of things, are the things that I think, you, especially, being younger, you should put energy into, don't concentrate on the money that you're not, getting from scams and frauds. Concentrate on the future money that you can make and how long you can make that money. And what you'll find is that with the longevity that exists in some of those business models, you will make far more money legally than you will illegally. You don't have to worry about getting busted. You don't have to worry about the feds taking everything. You don't have to worry about being separated from your family and, coming to the realization that your friends don't give a shit because you're locked away and they never write you and they don't care if you're dead or alive. And then when you get out, they try acting like your best friends. I gave up on the concept of friends a long time ago, because of that. It's not something I'm into. Like, my personality type is an INTP and subset A. So I'm already an introvert. So like, I'm good with that. I'm good with just my audience here. I was good with 50 subscribers, never mind the crazy amount that I have now. So, and it's great to see the interaction, and that's the interaction that I like, because it's more genuine to me than, the people I've met in real life. Crazy. But Biggs, I hope that answers your question, man. And I'm proud of you. Stay on that track, that's smart, it's smart, dude. And like, you might not see the wisdom in it now, but like, you will in the future. And definitely, drop us a line. You know, it's nice to see, you know, people do better. I like to see that kind of stuff. And like, if you can avoid a lot of the BS that I had to deal with, I hope you do, man. But if you guys like this video, give a thumbs up. And you know, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.